Welcome to Veteran Nexus Letter Live. It is that time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, first Monday of the month. My name is Dr. David Geier, triple board certified orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and anti-aging and regenerative medicine expert. I help veterans like you by writing Nexus letters, doing DBQs, TIDU letters, whatever it is, to help you get the disability, the compensation that you deserve for your orthopedic injuries. Very excited to be here. This is the one time a month where I answer your questions about disability claims, Nexus letters, DBQs, any of that kind of thing. Injuries as they pertain to disability claims. So excited to do that. We sometimes have long shows, we sometimes have very short shows. Really just depends on how many questions come in. As always, I am not giving specific medical advice on this podcast on this live stream. I haven't seen you, I haven't examined you, looked at x-rays, MRIs. This is meant for general information and educational purposes only. Also, I am not necessarily trying to promote what I do in working with me, although I'm happy to talk about that. I'm trying to help everybody. I know not everybody can move forward and work with me, and so hopefully this is my opportunity to give you information at no cost just by showing up and answering those questions. But very, very excited. I want to start with something as people are filtering in, and again, if you have a question, ask it in the chat, not in the comments below this video, in the chat. I cannot see the comments. I'm not on YouTube, even though this live stream is going to YouTube. I'm on a service called eCam, which sends YouTube chats to me, and that's how I chat messages, and that's how I see them. So leave those in the chat. If you're on a desktop or laptop, it should be on the right side of the screen. Not 100% sure on the phone, but look for the chat. So if I'm not answering your question, you're leaving it in the comments, try finding somewhere else to leave that. One thing I want to talk about real quickly, literally a question I was just answering as the music was playing, the countdown timer was going on, and that was basically how the process works. And a lot of people are very new to this. You may be watching this and you're an old pro, you know what a Nexus letter is, you know what a DBQ is, but basically this veteran reached out and says, hey, I'm in, I forget where he was, Kentucky or somewhere, you're in South Carolina, how can this work for a Nexus letter where there's, I can't travel to South Carolina, how could we do that? And so just real quickly, and again, a lot of you, this may be very basic. A Nexus letter involves no physical exam at all, and it can be done by somebody that is not your physician, not your orthopedic surgeon in my case. Basically, it's an expert that reviews your service records, reviews your medical records and any other records you have, and then helps make the argument that that injury was caused by your military service, or that that injury was caused by some other injury that you've already gotten service connection for, a secondary connection. But there's no exam, there's any of that, it's just looking at your records. Now you can ask your doctor to do that, somebody that has taken care of you, but it doesn't have to be your doctor. Now, what you're talking about as far as doing an exam with the person writing the Nexus letter is what's called a DBQ. Almost identical to a C&P exam, the form looks a little different, but otherwise it's pretty much the exact same questions and the exact same exam, just done by somebody not affiliated with the VA. Again, it doesn't have to be your doctor. Your doctor can do a DBQ, even though I don't know, at least in orthopedics, I don't know a single orthopedic surgeon that does DBQs. But having said that, that is a way to improve your Nexus letter and improve your disability claim, and yes, overcome a little bit of a potential, I don't think it's a very serious objection, but it shows that the person that wrote your Nexus letter really knows you, because not only did he or she review the records to put all into the Nexus letter, but also has done an exam of that body part, that condition, whatever it is. So I hope that's helpful. Again, I know nobody here specifically asked that, but I was literally answering that. Somebody asked me that by email just a few minutes ago. All right, Mark Shippy. I was in a Jeep accident in 1979, hurt my back and groin 2004, toes started buzzing 2009, had to go on disability. Sorry, it's really small on the screen, so never hurt my back while been out, age of 50, out of work. Have degenerative disc disease, IBDS, along with radiculopathy. So yes, I write, probably there's no condition that I write or no body part I write Nexus letters for more than the lumbar spine. Degenerative disc disease and IBDS sort of cancel each other out. One's just a more specific form of the other. But degenerative disc disease, I write a lot. The argument is, and to be fair, I'd want to see the records and know more of the specifics. But if that Jeep accident occurred in service, I would argue is very good. Ideally, you would have service treatment records that document going to sick call for that. Then it becomes much more convincing to the C&P examiner. But yeah, I think that's a reasonable thing. Lumbar spine, and especially degenerative disc disease, a lot of times can be argued also not necessarily based on a traumatic event. And Mark goes on to say he's been denied twice due to a weak Nexus letter. And I will come back to that. I want to make a comment about the weak Nexus letters. But you can also argue degenerative disc disease, and a lot of times, depending on what an MRI shows, there may be facet osteoarthritis, there may be either neuroforaminal or central canal spinal stenosis, and especially in this case where it sounds like there's what's called a radiculopathy, where it's causing pain, numbness, tingling down the legs, into the feet, toes. That's a separate condition and a separate rating, lumbar radiculopathy, and if it's both sides, it's two separate ratings in addition to the lumbar spine. Lumbar spine, right lower extremity, lumbar radiculopathy, or sciatica, as some people know it, or left lower extremity, so you get three. Anyway, but it can also be wear and tear over a long period of time. Ruck marching and carrying heavy packs and heavy equipment and all the different physical duties that so many military service members do. That's another way to argue lumbar spine degenerative disc disease, and that can be very effective. Last part is, and Mark didn't ask this, but lumbar spine can also be secondary to other conditions. Now, the one people like to ask me is, could it be secondary to the neck? That's a really tough sell. I would not feel comfortable. I could certainly try, and again, Mark's not asking that, but that's a tough road to go. There's the thoracic spine in between, and I've read so many denial letters. 80, 85, 90% of the veterans that reach out to me have already been denied for a condition before they reach out to me. So I have seen every possible reason the VA uses to deny, and claiming lumbar spine secondary to the cervical spine or vice versa, the VA almost always denies that. So that's where the primarily caused by the military works a lot better, which is what this is. But yes, that can be done. As far as the weak Nexus letters, I'll say this, and I'm not gonna badmouth any specific groups or people by any means. What I have seen just in having done this, and again, so many of the veterans that reach out to me have been denied before, and a lot of times their claims had Nexus letters, is that you are more than welcome and probably should at least talk to your doctor, and if they'll write one for you, that's great. In my experience, they tend to write very, very weak Nexus letters. They say, yes, I do think it was caused by military service, or I do think it was secondary to this, but it's like a one or two paragraph letter with very little information other than, hey, I took care of so-and-so for this long and he did these activities. I mean, it's just, there's nothing to it. There's no scientific studies. There's very little in the way of an argument as to why that condition would be caused by military duties or the primary condition. It's just not all that helpful. I have also seen very similar things with a lot of these firms that write hundreds of Nexus letters. Now, that's not generally true. Some of them do very good jobs, and I see those letters, they get sent to me as, even though the person got denied, it may not have been the Nexus letter. So you really want to look into it and find somebody that, really gets all your records and documents all that really well, uses a lot of scientific studies, and then has a lot of expertise in that field. I think the challenge that I have found is a lot of these C&P examiners, and I love nurse practitioners and PAs, and I've worked with them my whole career, but it certainly doesn't hurt your case to have somebody with more expertise in that particular injury. So if it's sinusitis, ideally, an ENT, otolaryngology, ENT surgeon. In the case of something like lumbar spine, an orthopedic surgeon, that's what they do. And it's not to be rude or anything, it just helps. And so that's what a lot of times these big firms that write hundreds of these a week for vets all over the place. A lot of times it's, again, PAs and nurse practitioners. And again, I love all of them, but they're writing, it's basically equivalent and may or may not be all that helpful. Feel free to disagree. I know there's a lot of debate about that. That's just what I've seen. But Mark, very specifically, yes, I'm happy to help. There's a link in the description below. It'll get you to an ebook, but if you go further down on that page, feel free to read the ebook. I think it's great. But there's a little form you fill out, and that will get to me and to my assistant, and we will get the ball rolling with you. But very, very happy to start. And he says he's rated at 60% for your neck. That's good and bad. It's a great rating, but to get a great rating, that's got to be a fairly serious condition. And he is saying, I have a lot of records for my problems. I am very happy to help, for sure. I do, I have a full-time medical practice, so I do this outside of my practice, but I do carve out. One of the great things about regenerative medicine and not being in the insurance world is I have complete control of my schedule, which is very rare in healthcare and in medicine. And so I carve out half days several times a week to do this kind of work. So I am very, very happy to help. Last thing on Mark, they said back hurting was due to a hernia at the same time. Now that would be interesting. I don't know necessarily how that pertains to the back. Probably has nothing to do with the claim, but if you developed a hernia as part of it, that potentially would be something you could claim as well. I'd want to know a little bit more about that. All right. So one of my former vets, and I only say that I keep everything confidential, but since he's putting it on YouTube, you can read it, had a higher level review focused on my Nexus letter, and his attorney told him it went well. I am very, very glad to hear that. So I'll stick around for another little bit for anybody, any straggling questions. Again, leave those in the chat if you're not figuring out. Look for Mark's questions. You should see a bunch of them, and that's how you know where to leave it. But yes, very happy to help. I feel that I've gotten very good at this. I never guarantee, and nobody can guarantee anything when it comes to these Nexus letters, DBQs, what have you, with these disability claims, because for a lot of reasons, the VA has reasons for the decisions they make. Sometimes I agree with them, sometimes I don't. And somebody that does this work really can't create records that aren't there. It's based on the evidence that's there. But having said that, I feel like I've gotten very good at it, and especially because such a huge percentage of the veterans that come to me have been denied before they come to me. I've easily read 1,000 denial letters, and I've seen it seems like the possible reasons to deny, which is what spurred the ebook that's completely free. You can go to the description below this video. There's a link to it and read. I wrote 30, 40, I don't even remember how many pages about the most common reasons the VA denies and why, and how you can improve on those to potentially not have that happen to you. But I think that that's really helped me be very selective and really only take on clients and veterans that I feel like have a good claim, and then go all in writing long Nexus letters with a lot of studies cited to make it as persuasive as possible. All right, Tim Robertson had a bad parachuting accident. U.S. Army Airborne Infantry, knocked unconscious, 94%, knees 30, sleep apnea 50. Messing up the thing. Nexus letter to connect lower lumbar to knees. Yeah, that's relatively easy. I don't want to say easy, straightforward to do. That's one of those things that. Shoot, I'm sorry, I already forgot your name. Tim, he didn't ask, but it's worth saying, that I've seen in denial letters is that if you try to submit a claim by yourself, just saying, let's just say your knees are service connected, and then you try to file your lower back just on your own. You submit the evidence, hey, I think this is secondary to my knees. You're almost certainly going to lose. No question. I see that all the time. And they'll say there's no evidence that a knee injury can cause the lumbar spine. They've got a bunch of fancy ways to say exactly that, but that's basically the gist of it. And if you ask 10 orthopedic surgeons, at least 9, if not 10, are going to disagree with that. We're going to tell you absolutely back pain, degenerative back conditions absolutely can be caused by a knee injury. There's no question about it. And there are studies that link them in a couple of ways. One, there are biomechanical studies showing that a limp leads to an alteration in the kinetic chain and increased stress on the back. But also, there are studies that show that people with say knee arthritis have higher rates of low back pain than people that don't, things like that. So yes, that absolutely can be done, but you would need somebody to argue that in a Nexus letter. I'm happy to help and have done that a number of times, but that is one I have seen denied a lot that comes to me, and I get kind of frustrated because it could be it should be service connected, but I think if you don't come in with the evidence on your side, it's just too easy for them to say, oh, there's no evidence. But again, these are people that don't typically have orthopedic background. In addition to the, again, nurse practitioners and PAs, which I have no issue with, most of them are family medicine background or medicine background, not orthopedics. And so they just either truly believe there's no evidence or at least say that and deny is my experience. All right. They failed miserably. Yeah. I'm not going to talk too much about attorneys. I'm underwhelmed with most of the attorneys that some of my vets have worked with. It's straightforward. Whether it's easy, it just depends on the quality of the argument. And then nothing, as I said at the very beginning of this, nothing is guaranteed. There are some VA CMP examiners that are just determined, especially in the setting of multiple denials. You want to win the first time, if at all possible, and not have to try to go back a second time after you've already been denied. It becomes easier and easier. Once you win, you tend to keep on winning, in my experience. Once you get denied, it's easy for them to keep on denying. And so you really want to win the first time. But if it's been denied, there are certainly ways to win. Mike, I have degenerative disc disease, foraminal narrowing on x-rays, MRI in 2 weeks. Can a Nexus made, that's exactly, sorry, I don't know when you got in here, Mike, but absolutely lumbar, spine, and knee can be linked, and most orthopedic surgeons would agree with that. Service record for knee pain, need to get a current diagnosis. Now, one thing I will say is that, and maybe you know this, maybe you don't, the first condition has to be service connected before you can argue the secondary condition, meaning the knee has to be service connected before you can argue the lumbar spine is secondary to it. That is a very quick denial if that hasn't happened. So you don't want to argue it secondary to something that hasn't already been service connected. Also, the better injuries, just in general, to serve as secondary orthopedic injuries are degenerative conditions that develop over a period of time. It would be much harder to argue some kind of acute injury, hamstring strain, ankle sprain, some acute event being secondary to another one. It's not impossible, but that would be a lot harder. Arthritis or some other wear and tear condition is a much better secondary condition to argue in terms of disability claims. Tim says, thank you, you're very welcome. Do I review records before payment? Yes, I do, and then and sort of get back to the veteran about what I thought about the records and do I think they have a good case. And then if the disability is denied, do I write a new Nexus or help with denial? I help. What I will offer to do, at least, it depends a little bit on what it is, what the reason for denial is. But if it is something where I just disagree with it, I will offer to do a rebuttal letter or something like that. What I have seen a lot of times is if you read the rating decision letter, you look at the evidence, they don't even mention the new Nexus letter. That's why I said it's so easy once you've been denied to keep on getting denied, and because they tend to just look back at the prior denial. If those reasons still exist, deny again. And so you really almost have to, and that's where I think at least good ones, VSOs, can be really helpful at making sure that that Nexus letter or DBQ or Nexus and DBQ get entered as evidence and get considered. But yes, to answer the question, I do help with that. All right, that is, it looks like everything. Tim, I think I got to everybody. Mark, David, very happy to hear, and keep me posted on that. Anyway, I will stop there. Very, very excited. There are links below that, again, you can get that ebook I was talking about, and you can start the process of working with me. My assistant can help get records get those sent to us, and then I can review them and then talk about next steps. I hope this was helpful. I will be back here in a month, August 4th, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And in the meantime, make sure to subscribe to this channel, Veteran Nexus Letter, where I release a new video every week. Feel free to reach out every time or anytime. I'm happy to help any way I can. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to helping you very, very soon. Take care.